Hey guys, Brian here. I've been working on this for a while. I'm filming this after I've edited pretty much everything else. This is my top 10 of 2019 list for video games. Have some honorable mentions in there as well. Just trying to put stuff out there, work on stuff. Check it out. If you don't get to the end of the video, leave some feedback about why. Uh, have a good one. First off, we have Citus 2. I've always kind of thought rhythm games were kind of boring, not my thing. Never a big rock band guy myself. And even though it didn't come out this year, there have been a lot of substantial updates throughout the year. They've added Hatsune Miku along with like four new characters just in 2019. And, it's hard to find a game that defined the year more for me than Citus 2. I got into it at the beginning of the year and fell for it hard. I'd sit in the car after a doctor's appointment just playing it, and I drove myself there. Like I was at a point where I'd rather sit idly in a parking lot playing this game for 40 minutes rather than immediately making a 20-minute drive home and just play it in my bed. Citus 2 combined three things I like: good art, good music, and a transhumanist sci-fi storytelling technique through fake news articles, message boards, and text messages. The way it sections off its genres is very smart. Every character has a vibe of music assigned to them. It's not necessarily a genre, it's more of a vibe. Path is a pop star. She's my favorite. Neko, with a bunch of symbols after it. Neko is a streamer who makes electronic type music, and Robohead does industrial electronic beats. Very intense stuff. I don't like him much. I found the story that unfolds through the main group and DLC characters to be absolutely unfathomable in a macro sense. But on an individual and interpersonal level, it works sometimes. Every song has a piece of art associated with it, and pretty much all of it is really good. Each character has their songs presented in a different way, giving them a vibe and attachment to their respective character I probably wouldn't have otherwise. Aroma's music selection being on a jumble of Times Square style screens, while Neko has her music displayed in a dark room during one of her streams. I found myself listening to the preview of a song because its accompanied art is so eye-catching. I also found myself spending like $50 for DLC characters in this game. I don't regret my purchase as they came with a decent number of songs in their own weird lore, but it may be worth waiting to go for them when they're on sale. I think the game and all the DLC are included with Google Play Pass, which is like Google's subscription service for games. So that's a great way to play this game and all of its content for way less than $50. By the way, the honorable mentions are a non-ordered list. I don't have a ton to say about Moonlighter, but Moonlighter is real neat. You're a shopkeeper by day, setting prices, managing your store, but at night you're the character of a roguelite if you're a stickler. It's not much deeper than that. I love the way it looks. It plays fun, and it also has a very satisfying loop of collecting treasure in dungeons and selling them to upgrade your store and equipment. It's a very pleasant game. Highly recommend it. Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I did not expect to beat this game at all. It's like 100 hours long. This game's so fucking big, and it has an immense amount of content. But it grabbed me. Odyssey's world is expansive and full of side content of varying quality, and I enjoyed pretty much every moment of it. It's what I imagined MMOs were like, except it's a single-player game. And I was constantly getting new gear, and there was always something meaningful to do depending on what you wanted to do at that moment. Having three storylines makes it so if you get tired of one, you can just hop to another. It reinvigorated my excitement about Assassin's Creed after years of underwhelming games. And with free monthly updates of quests and episodic paid content, it made me believe in the idea of a single-player live service game. I truly believe that there is a future in this series, and I'm very excited for whatever they do next. Pokemon Showdown. To give some context for this, we need to understand how goddamn complicated actual Pokemon is. I know it's a kid's game, anyone can enjoy it, but if you want to enjoy it on a competitive level, you need to understand breeding mechanics, egg moves, inherited values, effort values, natures, and some other stuff. While they've made strides in recent games, making these things less intimidating by servicing some of the mechanics, and even letting you alter them, at the end of the day, there's still a lot of time investment to get a single Pokemon to where they're viable on a competitive level. Showdown is a free program that lets you run whatever kind of set you want. You can pick any Pokemon you want, give them any item. It's a great way to learn how competitive Pokemon works just by letting you select the stats and moves for a Pokemon and play against other people. The main competitive Pokemon community, Smogon, actually balances Showdown by banning items, strategies, and Pokemon. This is what makes Showdown so much more than just a straight-up simulation of the official games. It's balanced on its own, and I think it stands as a testament of how deep the systems in Pokemon really are. If you're curious about competitive Pokemon, this is the place to start. Now we have Mindustry. I think that's how it's pronounced. I love turtling in RTS games. That's the strategy of just amassing resources without really being aggressive at all until you can just make a rush and kill everything. Well, Mindustry is basically just turtling. You're setting up conveyor belts and processors while you build turrets and other defenses to hold off waves of enemies. It's an RTS meets management sim meets tower defense, and it's really good. I played it on a Google Play Pass, which is, again, Google's subscription service, so I played it on a phone. And while the mobile version is good, it also recently launched on Steam and has been on itch.io forever. And I think those are probably the better versions. So probably play them there. But if you just want like a kind of chill RTS game where you're kind of building a factory, this is real good. I really agonized over whether this went on honorable mentions or the regular list. As of reading the script, it's actually in the regular list, but I didn't actually get to Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringer expansion, so I haven't even gotten past Heaven's Ward, the first expansion, so I guess it's an honorable mention because I didn't play any of the new content. This game would probably be in my top 3 games of the year, really, honestly. It defined the year for me a lot. This is the first time I've ever really played an MMO at all. Me and several of my friends got into it this year, and running into them randomly on the server is kind of magical in a way. Just even sharing a space, sharing a world with them. Even with the static NPCs, the world still feels like a place that you're existing. I get it now. The sense of community that you have simply by sharing a space with another person. It's really, really cool. I never felt overwhelmed by the side content and systems, mostly because I've been bypassing them entirely because they've kind of made it easy to bypass stuff just to get to the new expansion. I don't know what a spirit bond is, and I probably won't until I hit max level. My first 24-person raid was an absolute blast. I had never done anything like it. Doing dungeons with friends is a great way to interact with people long distance, just talking and doing something at the same time. The stuff that takes place between the end of Realm Reborn and the first expansion, a lot of shit, kind of blows. Pretty terrible. But it's not a game you need to pay a lot of attention to, so I just powered through it pretty much. I do think it is worth the jump. It's very user-friendly, beginner-friendly. It lets you get in there, just play around. It's fun. I think if you've never played an MMO before, this is definitely the place to start. If you're really into WoW or something, I have no idea. I can't really give my perspective on that, but I do really enjoy Final Fantasy XIV. Number 10. Outer Worlds. I don't really have much to say about it. I didn't really enjoy it that much. I don't even actually have a script written for it. But Outer Worlds, made by Obsidian, the people that made one of my favorite games ever, Fallout New Vegas. They're putting out this game, and they put it out, and it's definitely good for most of it. It felt short. It felt kind of... There was just something missing that was there in Fallout New Vegas. It wasn't the open world, I don't think. The lack of open world didn't do it for me. It felt like Fallout New Vegas, but the characters weren't that interesting. Parvati is great. So the other characters are serviceable, but the mechanics never felt like they were there. I mean, Fallout New Vegas plays like shit. Not like shit, but it's just, not that great. But Outer Worlds, it seemed like it was a game probably made for people like me that love New Vegas, and it just kind of missed the mark by a wide margin. It felt like it missed the mark on some kind of margin. That's why it is number 10. That doesn't necessarily mean it's my least favorite game of 2019. That probably didn't. I just totally forgot about whatever my least favorite game was. So Outer Worlds is definitely good. It was just kind of disappointing for me. Number 9. Risk of Rain 2. It's in early access, but I'm counting early access, and I'll count it again when it comes out if it really changes that much and I give a shit about it. Risk of Rain 2, I really love Risk of Rain, the 2D roguelike fun game. It's a 2D roguelike. You're shooting guns. It's sci-fi, whatever. So when they said Risk of Rain 2 was going to be a 3D shooter, I was absolutely on board. That seems like such a strange leap. But they transition it quite well. It's still just as fun, if not more fun, to have weapons and items you get just stack until you're an unkillable machine. And I think it's great to play with friends. I bought it on day one. They had that deal for like a week, if you bought it, you get a free copy for a friend. And I did that. Me and my girlfriend played it, and really fun stuff. I absolutely love Risk of Rain. It is really good. They pulled off the transition really well. I'm excited to see what they do as they continue to build on it. Good shit. Number 8. Dreams is the natural progression of Media Molecule's previous games. Little Big Planet and Little Big Planet 2, they were absolutely fascinating to look at when people somehow made a working calculator or some kind of shooter within the framework of a 2D platform level creator. And Dreams pretty much gets rid of that 2D framework entirely. It is absolutely mind-blowing to play what people have made. A simple multiplayer 3D fighter, a recreation of the now unavailable game PT, and my favorite is a game where you play as an adorable kaiju called Ruckus. That game's called Ruckus. It's built around creativity, and if you're an artist without a knack for game design, you can just make models that other creators can use, and you'll be credited for it. That's what I think is so great. They're really thinking about how this all fits together, how people can build levels and feel part of that community of creators. I personally don't have a talent for anything, so I just enjoy playing or viewing other people's creations. I'm a fucking parasite, what can I say? This is the promise of Little Big Planet fully realized. I cannot wait to see what people are going to make in the coming years. Whether it be some kind of RPG or some multiplayer game, I am absolutely blown away by what this could become. Number 7. Control, really good. Where Control really shines is its lore. The basic story is good, it is intriguing, but it's only intriguing because of the lore. The issue, it's heavily inspired by group projects like SCP, and the issue with SCP is that their lore could be coming from pretty much anyone. So it has a high possibility of being corny. But Control's collectible files and lore are all written by a cohesive team, and a really good one at that. I read literally every piece of lore I could get my grubby little hands on, and I usually never do that with video games. For instance, Death Stranding's lore logs, they suck ass. The emojis are funny, but there's a lot, and I can't read it all. But Control absolutely captivated me. The story's alright, the gameplay is fun, but for me it all comes back to the lore. The lore, probably the best in any video game. You should play it. Number 6. Katana Zero is a game that kind of makes good on the idea of being John Wick. You play as an assassin who goes and kills people, with every death and failure being presented simply as a premonition of the player character as he plans out how to get through the room by using his super cool drug that lets him see the future. It has a super strong sense of style, and the gameplay isn't bad either. The gameplay is actually really good. It kind of has that Hotline Miami feel of one hit, one death for the enemies and you. And as you're going through it and really perfecting it, to see that final run, it just feels great. And the story goes in some really fascinating directions as well. I'm really excited to see where the story goes in sequels. I hope they make them. And when this game came out, I thought it was sure going to be like top 5 games of the year. But maybe I kind of cooled on it. I don't know, but I really enjoy Katana Zero. Absolutely play it. Godlike game. Number 5. I came into writing this list thinking Death Stranding could probably be number 1, number 2 on the list. But I don't know, man. I kind of cooled on it. I was intrigued about Death Stranding the moment it was announced. Kojima finally off Konami's leash. Sounded really exciting to me. But as more of it was revealed as being a Delivery Man game, and a lot of people grew concerned about that. I was not one of them. Seemingly mundane mechanics and actions that further ground you in a game are some of my favorite things. Like making a campfire and making food in Red Dead Redemption 2, sharpening your weapon in Monster Hunter in the middle of a fight, or applying oils and tonics in The Witcher 3. I love all of these things, and that's why I didn't love Breath of the Wild as much as other people. That stuff all felt like you didn't need to do it, and it felt almost separated from the world. It's why I like Death Stranding more than Breath of the Wild, actually. Sure, you can cook and take potions in Breath of the Wild, but it never felt scrappy. It never felt essential. In Death Stranding, Sam needs to sit down and stretch his legs out. He needs to find shelter from the rain. And after doing all these things and finally delivering the package, it feels so rewarding. It feels like you completed a long journey, a job well done. The online component adds a ton. The ground being worn down because other people walked there. Bridges being built by people across large chasms, a climbing rope lying on a steep hill. These things built by other players make you feel connected to others without ruining the isolated feel of a delivery. Collaborating with people you'll never see to build a highway across the entire map felt like a massive accomplishment. This all successfully builds on the theme of connectivity that Kojima is going for. Sure, the story kind of sucks. I didn't really like it. Maybe it's for other people. They love it. It's weird, but doesn't really feel weird in a way that matters. Metal Gear, that's all built on lore, like old lore from the other earlier games, and it's batshit. But this is a new game, and it's just as batshit as Metal Gear, if not more so, but I don't feel connected to it. But the story isn't really why I went to the game. The deliveries, the connectivity of other people, it all felt beautiful in a way. And it's why Death Stranding made this list more than other things. Despite being a deeply flawed game, I still think it did something that other stuff can't make me feel. I say things like I like Red Dead 2 and Death Stranding more than Breath of the Wild. But Breath of the Wild is a really good game. If they just took some of the mundane elements from Red Dead or Death Stranding, I would like Breath of the Wild more. But as of now, these mechanics are what make the game for me, and I'm so glad it exists and that Kojima got to make it.
Number 4.
Dauntless first appears to be just a free-to-play Monster Hunter clone. And that's kind of what it's going for. But it's a lot more than that. It's Monster Hunter for normal people. Sure, Monster Hunter World claimed to be this by getting rid of some of the more unforgiving mechanics from older entries. But at the end of the day, it still had its weird multiplayer system when it came to friends, and it still had its really weird gameplay quirks. I still really like Monster Hunter World, but I don't always have the time or patience to play it. Dauntless does away with the eating, sharpening, and other little mechanics from Monster Hunter and boils it down to a formula. Equip armor and weapons with the correct affinity for the hunt, kill the monster and dismember it for parts along with 3 other people, then use the monster parts to craft more weapons and armor. It sounds soulless on paper when you put it like that, but it's actually kind of beautiful. There's a real joy to matchmaking in this game. Fighting a giant boss and leaving, no strings attached. It still keeps some of the depth from its inspiration. Each weapon type has its own unique mechanics, like the hammer having an active reload, or the axe being based on charge attacks, or the guns, being guns. If Monster Hunter is PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, Dauntless is Apex Legends, taking an unforgiving genre that is full of clunkiness and depth, then boiling it down to a super colorful free-to-play game for the masses. I do think it really works. And this is the first time the crossplay features have really stuck with me. I had a great time with crossplay and the cross-save functionality. Being able to play with my friends while they're on Switch and I'm on PS4, it's really neat that it just works. It's crazy. This is the future. About the free-to-play stuff, I don't know. I don't know if it's pay to win. I've played a lot of it, and while it doesn't seem like it's going to be play to win, there are definitely parts of it I look at and say, it could probably be like that later. But it's free. It's on Switch, Xbox, PC, PS4. I definitely suggest you check it out, because if you want that Monster Hunter feel, without that Monster Hunter feel, Dauntless has got it. Number 3. A lot of controversy about Pokemon Sword and Shield, with a lot of the older Pokemon not being included at all. The backlash was warranted too, not to the extent that some people took it. But these games haven't really been impressive at all since the jump to 3D. And having so many Pokemon get cut with no apparent benefit doesn't sit well with most people, and it didn't sit well with me. The game itself lacks meat too, with a lot of narrative events being handled off screen, or just a lack of a post-game at all really. The game is fun though. They will always be fun to me to some extent. The design of the new Pokemon are really good. Probably my favorite generation of new Pokemon ever. This is probably the first Pokemon game where I've only wanted to use new Pokemon on my team, and I had a really hard time narrowing it down to just 6. The quality of life improvements are a welcome change as always, but the wild area feels empty outside of the raid battles. It kind of looks like shit in some places, and they've somehow reverted to a pre-2013 state with their online functionality. There's no GTS anymore, but I still feel drawn to it. The culling of old Pokemon, while a negative overall, has shaken up the competitive scene and revitalized my interest in it. While I enjoy grinding the max raid battles for items in Pokemon, it's a good loop, but not a proper endgame. The story is basically nothing, but I do appreciate the exciting new feature of how most characters end up in different places than where they started narratively. In other works of fiction, this is called a character arc. If you like Pokemon on some basic level, this is probably one you'll enjoy. I did. And hey, they're patching in some older legacy Pokemon for free, so maybe they'll patch in the rest of them. I don't know. Most of what I've said about Pokemon Sword and Shield has been negative, and that's a fair criticism. Brian, why is this so high on the list if most of it is negative? But I'm a simp. I play a lot of Pokemon. I love Pokemon, and this game was undeniably fun, and that's why it ranks high. I don't think you should necessarily play it over the games that are worse, lower on the list than this, because this is my list, and I would honestly suggest you play Katana Zero, you play Dauntless before you try a new Pokemon game. Lower barrier to entry. I think they're much more interesting than Pokemon, but Pokemon was just undeniably some of the most fun I had all year with video games. And that's why it's so high on the list.
Number 2.
My experience with Outer Wilds was kind of fucked. I got like halfway through it on my brother's Xbox, then I had to go back to college, which is pretty far away from where my brother is, and I didn't touch it for like 4 months. Then I got back home, and I beat it. My experience was absolutely fucked, because Outer Wilds is probably one of the greatest games I've ever played. It feels like it achieves everything it tries to do, and blends story and progression in a way I never even considered. Play this game. It's hard to really describe what it means to me because I'm not a good writer, but the way its narrative is structured and the themes it covers secure it as probably one of the best games of the generation, and much less this year. But the reason it doesn't get my number 1 spot is because my experience was fucked with it. I ruined it for myself. And on PS4, a lot of people had a bug where it just corrupted their save. And while there's no real progression in the game, it did fuck with their notes, their in-game notes. And that sucks. So I hope that if you play this game, and that bug on PS4 has been fixed. I hope if you play this game that you really try to like get through it, because my experience with it kind of tainted it for me. I can look at this game, I can see the enjoyment that I had with it, and I know it is one of the greatest games ever made. But my experience was honestly not what it should have been, and that sucks. I'm pretty bummed about that. But you should absolutely play this game. More than anything else on this list, you need to play this game.
Number 1.
Reach for my hand, I'll soar away into the dawn.
I didn't go into this list thinking Fire Emblem Three Houses would be my number 1 game of the year. I wasn't even sure it would be top 3. But the more I thought about it, and the more I remembered how much I enjoyed it, it just ended up this way. I thought I was kind of tired of Fire Emblem after Awakening and then the Fates trilogy, but Three Houses really steps it up. Three Houses does away with the weapon triangle, which makes every unit feel more viable in a moment-to-moment system. The school system, where a student will come up to you and say that they want to specialize in a different class than they're in, or you're telling them to specialize in different proficiencies, that adds a lot of gameplay depth to normally mundane interactions. These things all go and make a gameplay loop that I kind of was tired of after Awakening and Fates, it made it feel meaningful again. When I saw a character I had trained and had all these conversations with about how they wanted to fight on the battlefield, and I saw them do good on the battlefield, it felt good. It was cool to see that. And I guess I wouldn't be super as invested in their progress if the characters weren't good, but they are better than they have ever been. They're introduced as tropes, and they kind of have bland character designs compared to previous entries, but as you play, those tropes are twisted in interesting ways, and they all have a reason for why they are. And I would say that the worst supporting character in Three Houses is probably a better character than every supporting character in Awakening or the Fates trilogy. It kind of makes you wonder if those eye-catching character designs from the previous entries were almost like overcompensation for the flat writing. And the voice acting kind of took me aback. The fact that pretty much every line of dialogue is voice acted in this game, and I know that probably doesn't mean much to people that don't play a lot of Japanese games, but that shit is pretty rare in my experience, and it is certainly a first for the series to have pretty much every line of dialogue voiced by these characters, even the mundane optional conversations. I also think that it's great that they finally made good on their ambition of making 3 separate games within a game, which they did with the Fates trilogy, Birthright, Conquest, and Revelations. But this time it's all in one game. You're basically playing the same game with different characters up to the halfway point. Then afterwards it branches off and becomes 3 very different games. It also does some stuff that I would almost consider daring with the writing. I can't really get into it because spoilers, but I just never expected a video game to do what it did in the writing. And I think that it really took me aback. It was crazy when that happened. The music is also incredible. It uses what you think you know about Fire Emblem music, just kind of horns and violins and shit, and it'll flip it on its head in moments where it thinks it'll make a lot of impact. And it does make a lot of impact. There are moments in the game that recontextualize music you've heard before, and then in turn, that music, with the new context that you have, recontextualizes the story. And I just think that was an amazing moment when that clicked for me, you know? In a game about war, it's good that there's no real happy ending. You will be cutting down characters you've kind of learned to care about throughout the first act of the game. And I think that's a really good thing. To force you into these tough decisions and make you see how much war kind of sucks without giving you an out is pretty brilliant, I think. All this combined with the fact that the game is just plain fun to play for me. If you're into strategy RPGs, then this is probably one for you. It just made it my number one. I mean, as I played it, I was having such a blast. I was so enthralled with everything going on in the plot. And the characters, I still think about them. I still see fan art of them. They will stand the test of time as really good video game characters. That's why this game is my game of the year. I think everyone with a Switch should try this at least once. If you know you hate Fire Emblem, then this may not do it for you, but it might, because I do think it shakes things up in a way that I was never expecting, and it really blew me away. Hey, I hope that wasn't terrible. I hope you liked it. I know it's pretty rough, a lot of footage, just not really related to what I'm talking about. The only stuff I captured myself was the Sidus 2 stuff, and I believe the Pokemon Showdown. The other stuff is from trailers. I don't want to steal footage from people like other streamers or whatever, so I didn't do that. I just want to put stuff out there into the world. I know it wasn't perfect, but I didn't need it to be perfect. I just needed to produce something and put it out. So let me know. Give me feedback, even if it seems obvious. All of it's appreciated. Have a good one.